We're going to bake up some sourdough and yeah, that's what we're doing. It's kind of a big thing today. So as you can see, I've got my big pot and both my big pots because I'm making both baked ziti for us, and then I'm making a really large take and bake baked ziti for my friends. So let's get this going. So this is going to be on party scale size. So I've got my sourdough. We're going to flip this guy out and we'll score him up and get him in our Dutch oven. And just going to do a basic kind of score on here. And score down. We'll do kind of our wheat leaf. And we'll slide this guy into our oval Dutch oven that's nice and hot that I've had preheating at 500 degrees. So it will be nice and toasty in there. There we go. And we'll put our lid on. Let's seal in that moisture. And then my next loaf, so that was a traditional loaf. This is a black pepper, oregano, and Parmesan cheese. No, not oregano, rosemary, garlic, salt, Parmesan cheese kind of loaf. So pretty excited about this one because my idea with this flavoring was kind of similar to the loaf that you have at Macaroni's, which is a kind of like an Italian restaurant. So I've got my main score here. And then I'm going to try to do kind of a cute little Christmas tree. Whether it will turn out, who knows, but it should be fairly pretty. And then we'll do kind of like its trunk. Okay, we'll see if it actually bakes up like a Christmas tree or not. Yeah, like the trunk of the tree. Not like a car trunk, but it's got a little square for the trunk of the tree. There we go. I'll slide that in there. And go pop these in our ovens. We're going to bake them at 500 for 20 minutes, and then we'll bring our temperature down to 450 and bake. Hello, Loki. I don't want to step over you. That would be a disaster. So pop them in 500 degrees, nice and toasty, and then we'll bake after 20 minutes. We'll bake them at 450 for 20 minutes with the lid off. I'll get this guy in here. But I find, so my traditional I did in a loaf shape, and my round I did in a bowl, shape, but I kind of cook them in the corresponding Dutch ovens. Timer on. 20 minutes. Okay, let's drop our noodles in, and then we're going to make our meatballs and our sauce and everything. So, like I said, I am making this for a group, a crowd, a party, essentially. We're going to have what for dinner, but then I'm going to make a huge batch for my friends for kind of like a take and bake. Let me grab some scissors. So we'll get this going. You want to bake your ziti to a little bit before al dente. So you don't want them super tender because, again, they're going to be baking up in the oven and they'll soak up more sauce and get more tender from there. So overcooking your pasta will give you a mushy baked ziti. So we've got one bag. We're going to see how. 2. 3. And again, I have a ridiculously large stock pot for this. Because if you got to bake or boil 5 pounds of pasta, you want to be able to fit it all in here. I think I got a piece. There we go. And we'll get one more bag in here. So the nice thing about this pot that actually is a winner is it has this built-in strainer. So when I'm ready, I can just do it that way. So I don't have to try to flip it over. So that's a win. I do love this stock pot. You give it a good stir. Kind of mix it around. And then we'll let that come to a boil. And once they're nice and tender, we'll come out. It'll need about, since there's so much pasta in here, it's going to need a smidge longer than if you're cooking one bag. So about 10 minutes. I am going to sprinkle just a little bit of salt in here. There we go.
Video question. Do you have any alternatives for people who don't have Dutch ovens? I assume.
For baking sourdough, yes. So you can definitely do it with I've seen it done with like the 2 loaf pans where you put a loaf pan on top of it to seal it in there. But you don't even have to do the loaf pan stuck on that. You can do it in your Dutch oven with a pan, or not in your oven with a pan underneath that has water or ice cubes in it. That's going to steam it up. So essentially the Dutch oven creates a steamy environment. So you don't have to add the extra water, but you could put a water dish in your oven to create that steam thing. And then you kind of just bake it for about 30 to 40 minutes at, 450 for that. Okay, so we have about 8 pounds of meat, and we are going to make a lot of meatballs with this. So I've got about 4 pounds of ground beef and 4 pounds of mild Italian sausage. So we need 8 slices of bread. And we're going to soak our 8 slices of bread with enough cream to make each bread turn into a paste, but we don't want to be dripping in cream. So you're going to use probably around, 3/4 of a cup for this, give or take. Just pour it in little by little. I use heavy cream because it makes the meatballs more delicious, but you could always use milk or half and half. You're just going to need a little bit less milk and a little bit less half and half because it's not as thick. So it makes the bread soggier faster. And we use this instead of breadcrumbs because it makes your meatballs so much more tender and less dry. So as you can see, I've made this they're soaked up in there. You need to use a soft bread for this. You can't use like a sourdough or a crusty Italian because that crust won't fall apart, and so you'll have chunks of crust in your meatballs.
Are you cooking for more than just your family?
I am. So I'm making a small dish for our family to eat for dinner tonight, and then I'm making a big kind of take and bake tray, which I won't bake, but I'll have prepped and ready so that for my friend that she's going to serve. She's having family in town, and she's going to be serving about 10 adults. So we'll have enough for them. I'm making also tonight, we're going to do a late night tonight and bake up some cookies. The dough we prepped up at lunchtime and a few other, I'll throw in a Holiday Aunt Aggie's, and I'm making a kind of a Christmas cookie sampler for her as well. Okay, so in our bread, our 8 slices of bread that we soaked with about 3/4 cup of cream, we're going to add in 8 eggs because the rule of thumb is 1 slice of bread per pound and 1 egg per pound of meat. Got a little shell in there. Get that out, see if there's any more hiding. Sometimes you get an egg that just loves to crack really easy. There we go. Okay, so we've got all of our eggs in there. And now before I go fully in there, let me wash my hands. We're going to do our spices. And we need a lot more spices than when we normally, because again, we are seasoning up a lot of meat here. And you don't want bland meatballs. So we've got our onion powder. We're going to use about, 3 tablespoons of onion powder. So we're just going to shake it around. We're going to use about 3 tablespoons or so of garlic salt because we've got 8 pounds of meat we need to season up. So good shake around. Italian seasoning. We're going to use about 3 tablespoons of Italian seasoning, which I think is really just going to be close to this entire thing.
You have a question? Does it matter if the eggs are cold or room temperature?
Doesn't matter because we're gonna mix it all together. The meat's cold, so it will all come in and we'll bake at the same time. So it doesn't really matter. We're gonna do about a half a tablespoon of oregano and about a half a tablespoon of basil. And now is the fun part. Make sure. We're going to go in with our hands and we're going to mix this all together to make a panade, which is going to be the glue that holds our meatballs together. So you're just going to squeeze it through your hands like this until it's all mixed up. You've got most of that breadcrumbs, or not breadcrumbs, but most of the crust of your bread kind of broken up. And again, you don't want your bread to be so soggy that it's sitting in a puddle. So that's why you just kind of make it enough to help it break down, but not too. Right. And doing this instead of doing a like a breadcrumb and egg mixture gives you just the most tender meatballs that aren't spongy at all, but are just really delicious. And it's flavored all throughout. So when we mix our meat into it, just gives it so much flavor. So here is the base part of our panade. I'm going through. There's really no other way than getting in with your hands to do it. Okay. So we've got our big meaty thing. Now we're going to add in our meat. I'm just going to go through all of this. We've got 4 pounds of Italian sausage. Grab.
Will you be going live when you bake up the cookies?
Yes, we'll do a live tonight when I bake them all up. So it will be like a cookie-thon, lots of deliciousness on there, which is perfect because between baking the batches, you can prep the next one because not all of the cookies are simply roll out. Some you need to roll in sugar or place cherry on them. So, and it's perfect because cookies don't take very long to bake up. Okay, getting our meat in. I'm using, so I kind of like to do the ratio of half Italian sausage, half ground beef. And then once we've got these shaped up and in the oven, we can start working on our sauce. There we go. Get that off. So we got our Italian sausage. Now we're doing our ground beef. And you could also use ground chuck if you want to. The other day I used Wagyu and they were so tender and delicious.
Do any of the kids cook?
You know, they've had some interest in it. They love to help me kind of cook at times. Chef Teddy, you know, often makes an appearance during lunchtime when he's not at school. But it's funny they like come and go, but I just am always cooking all the time. That they're typically at sports when I'm doing a lot of the cooking, so they don't do it. But they do enjoy it. I think my 13-year-old, he's 14 now. My 14-year-old son, he has a really good palate, and I think that he is going to make for an excellent like cook one day. Okay, we're gonna go through, and you see I'm using this like really big bowl. We're gonna use that to kind of mix up. So just kind of scoop this panade over into your meat and punch it down, and then we'll kind of do the squeeze through the fingers. I will tell you that you want your meat to be not right out of the fridge when you do it. Let it sit on the counter for about 30 minutes because if it's right out of the fridge, you are going to freeze your fingers. Because the only way to get in here is to squeeze it through with your hands. Can't really mix it with a spoon. And so when it's really cold, your hands are cold. And that is something I have just learned through the time. Just set your meat out a little bit so it can just get a little bit less cold. Okay. And once we've got it in here, it will all form one cohesive paste. Now, it takes a little bit longer to do it when you have a ridiculous amount of meatballs to make, but it will work well. And essentially, once it's all kind of the same color, because when you first start mixing it, you can see the difference between the Italian sausage and the ground beef. As you mix, you want it all to kind of be one same color.
How many are you cooking for?
So this is like 20 on here. So I'm making some for our dinner tonight, and then we are making kind of like a take and bake for a friend for tomorrow. So it's essentially like cooking for 20 because we have our 7 tonight plus my parents, and then for them there's kind of a party of 10 that they're cooking. I'm cooking for.
And can you go over what's in the meat?
So yeah, so we have half ground beef, half Italian sausage, and then we made a panade using eggs, cream, bread, Italian spices, or Italian seasoning, oregano, basil, onion powder, and garlic salt. So we'll have lots of great flavor in each meatball. And this is, again, there's no way to do it without getting messy. Okay, I think we are fairly mixed up here. You can see that panade as it mixes in, it really just makes the meat nice and sticky and holds it together. So it's that binder. But it allows you to have a really tender and moist meatball versus if you just try to cook up ground beef, it's going to get firm and it won't be as tender. This is going to be delicious. Okay, hold my hand up. Got my big baking sheets out. Now we are going to start shaping up these meatballs. Oh, that's heavy. It's like 10 pounds of meat. Now, my trick here is not to go so big. My ideal world, I would be like, yeah, we can do a meatball this big. No, I got to do regular size meatballs, which is not always the most fun. I can do a little bit bigger, but I can't go super big. Now, sometimes I do make jumbo meatballs because there's this restaurant, like my stepdad always tells me about it, and it's in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, called Dinopoli's. And they serve you these giant meatballs. So you get just one, but it's like that big. It's like a softball on your plate with your spaghetti there. So we'll shape these guys up, and then we'll bake them in the oven. Once our oven turns to 450, we'll bake them underneath the sourdoughs, which will prevent a little bit of that direct heat. But otherwise, you could bake them off at just like 400 or 425, or you could even do 350 for longer. These are really flexible with the baking heat. You just adjust the time.
But where'd you get the bowl?
The bowl I actually bought on Amazon. I do have it in my Amazon storefront because I really like it. It's a ceramic, it's not a, it's, how would I say, it's a metal bowl with a, I want to say ceramic coating, but that is not the right word. I can't think of the name of the word. But it's got like a nice coating on it that makes it non-stick. But it is great for big batches of this, or when I make like a triple batch of my sourdough. I use that often for it. Puppy chow, if you make big batches of puppy chow, it's really good for that. But it's nice because it's a metal bowl, which I really like metal bowls because I feel like they conduct the heat really well, like especially for proofing sourdough. I know some people are like, oh, it's got to be plastic. I find that my sourdough proofs better in a metal bowl than a plastic bowl. And get these guys. I feel like I'm going to be rolling balls for days. Now, if you want like a perfectly smooth shaped ball, just have a little bowl of olive oil next to you that you dip your fingers or your hands in every so often. The oil will create like a non-stick surface on your hand, which will give you a really smooth meatball. But if you're like me, who cares more about just how it tastes and not necessarily whether they're perfectly uniform, I just kind of do it this way.
Where can I find the full recipe for the meatballs?
So I will upload this live on our link on our page, so you can always watch and recreate any of my recipes by just rewatching the live. I also, for my members, I do believe I have my Italian meatball recipe card available for them already. For our members, I do try to send out recipe cards, a couple times a month of recipes that I've cooked during that month for them. But for everybody else, I do upload all of my videos, so you can always just watch and recreate them. And I make sure I go through every single step so you can recreate every process.
And what's the seasoning on the meatball?
So it's a mixture. We have onion powder, garlic salt, Italian seasoning, oregano, and basil. So a lot of great flavors that really go well with the Italian kind of cuisine. And then, of course, you have Italian sausage and ground beef in here. So you've got that mix. And we'll get this kind of first batch down. Oof. A lot of meatballs here. I feel like I've rolled so many and I'm not even halfway done with my bowl. So we might get our first batch baking in. That way we can get our dinner prepped, and then I can work on the second batch to go on it next. That's the nice thing about this is a great meal that you can prep ahead. So if like you need to bring a dish or you have family coming, you can make most of this meal beforehand. Then you just sprinkle the cheese on top. And then when you're ready to serve it, or a little bit before, you bake it. The cheese melts, it reheats everything inside it, and it just holds really well. Okay. Be a lot of meatballs. And these, I will say, these meatballs are also really great. I used to always make them when I used to work outside of the house when I was teaching still. I used to make a whole bunch of meatballs like on a weekend, and I'd freeze them down in batches and reheat them so that I could make spaghetti and meatballs really quick throughout the week.
Earth Angel sent you.
Oh, thank you, Earth Angel. We appreciate that.
And do you have to use breadcrumbs to hold them together?
So I do not use breadcrumbs. I make a panade using bread and cream and egg as my binder. It gives you a juicier, more tender meatball. I feel like breadcrumbs just dry out your meatball and they make it really, really spongy. So I really like the panade, which is kind of a French way of doing it. But pretty much all of my meatball recipes that I do, and I have like 1,000,001 different variations of different types of meatballs, I use the panade as my binder. And the only meatball that is a little bit different is my Swedish meatball, which I use a little bit of mashed potato in it, as it also a starch that binds it. Okay. Think we'll get this row rolled up, then I'll wash my hands and I can shape up the rest of these later in the second batch. But
I have a question. Can you freeze the meat?
So pre-frozen meat, I don't think it would be really difficult because then you would have to thaw it. And a lot of times when ground beef is frozen, it doesn't come out the same texture as before. It's not as smooth. So if I were gonna freeze these and use these another one, I would pre-bake them, and then to just pre-bake the whole meatballs and bake them and then freeze them down after they're baked.
Can you go over what a panade is?
Yes. Let me just get my hands a good scrub down there first. Okay. So a panade is essentially the perfect timing, the binder for our meatballs. So it is a mixture of bread, egg, and cream, and then of course whatever spices you're going to use. So in here, the way I do it is 1 egg and 1 slice of bread per pound of meat. And I use enough cream to soak the bread without it getting super soggy. Let me grab my oven mitts real quick. Okay, we're gonna pop these meatballs underneath our Dutch ovens, and then we'll turn our temperature down to 450. And then we're gonna take our Dutch ovens out of here and we'll take off the lids for their second part of baking. Okay, so we've got 1 and 2. So here is our traditional loaf here. We've got its nice little pop. And then here is our kind of Parmesan and rosemary garlic one. We'll pop these back in. And now we're going to turn our oven temperature down to 450. And luckily, opening the door several times will have helped bring it down to that temperature. And then we're going to set it for 20 minutes. And our meatballs should be done a few minutes before that, so we'll grab them out. The meatballs at 450, only you're going to need about 15 minutes to cook up at that temperature, which will be perfect. Let's check on our noodles.
Do you find is sourdough forgiving, or do you have to be very precise?
Sourdough, I have found, is pretty forgiving on a lot of things. One thing it is not forgiving on is temperature. If you put it in a really cold refrigerator, you still need a few more minutes. They are pretty, I will say, I had Teddy whipped together, and he's 4 now, but he was 3 years old. I had him whip together a fun batch of sourdough, a small one, and he just randomly dumped stuff in and didn't really do true stretch and folds, and his sourdough turned out. If you have a good starter, your sourdough will be forgiving. I think a lot of people make the mistake of not feeding their sourdough or their starter the appropriate time before making their bread, which can leave you a really flat and dense or like loaf.
And do you ever make homemade yeast or yeast bread?
I do make a lot of homemade yeast and yeast breads. It just really depends on what I'm making. So the other day I made some breadsticks and a challah, and then saffron buns, cinnamon rolls, pretzels. I have a lot of ones that I do yeast. Sometimes I do focaccia with yeast. Sometimes I do it with sourdough. It really kind of depends. If I need a bread and I haven't thought much about it, and I don't have a sourdough ready, then it's going to be a yeast bread. The sourdough takes about a day before I can bake it up. So I've got my huge Dutch oven here. This is the biggest size that Le Creuset makes. It's like the 13.25 liter or quart, I think, one. But this is my chili pot. I pretty much use it to make my Super Bowl chili every single year. And just imagine, I feel like it's like 50 pounds of chili. But I make a huge batch of it every year in this. And a couple other, I'll make some soups when I have my family in at Thanksgiving because there's a lot of people here. But outside of that, it doesn't get as much use. The pot, though, the one thing about this pot is it is like already 25 pounds. It's cast iron, so it's so heavy. But I remember when I got it, it was the Le Creuset was, I guess they were closing down their store here, and it was 75% off. So this pot is normally like $500-$600. And I got it for $100. It was such a steal on here. So when we've got our onions here that we're going to use for our sauce, I'm just going to do a couple little chops over them. We'll get that sauteing, and then our noodles should be done because I gave them another minute or so. And we're going to add just a little bit of veggies to our sauce. I'm not going overboard with it. But we're going to add some zucchini, mushrooms, peppers, and then, of course, some garlic. So we'll get this going. Now, I said the really cool thing about this dish here, the plate, is this pot. And has a built-in, you can use it with or out, but it has a built-in strainer, as you can see. It makes it easier for cooking large batches of pasta. Giving it a good shake out. Whew. That's heavy. I'm going to dump this water since we don't need the water. And then I can put these noodles back in here like this and let them strain. It sits about an inch off the bottom of the pan, so it's really cool. I always say, people are always like, this is the coolest pot ever. And I said, it is. It's a cool pot.
Have you ever thought about opening a restaurant?
I've thought about it, but I don't know if I would love it because I enjoy cooking for friends and family. but I don't know if I would love it if it was my job. You know what I mean? Where you got to cook it out and then there's critics and everything like that. I already have a hard enough time when my 10-year-old criticizes my food, and she does that on a daily basis. So I don't know. It's just one of those things. Would you lose your passion for it if it wasn't, if it was work and not for fun? And I really do love cooking. It's like one of those things where, this year I finally convinced my mom to give me full control over Thanksgiving. One year I had full control because she was like so sick with like some flu or whatnot. But then she kind of came back and took over a little bit of it. But I was like, you have to let me have control and do it so I can do it my way. And she let me have it this year. And it was just so much nicer. People were less stressed. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed being in the kitchen and people would come and chat, and it's just something I love. I love cooking for people. It's like my love language. It's how I can tell people I care, is when I can make them a nice meal. But I don't know if I would love it if I was making, having a restaurant. Now maybe if I could like watch and it was my recipes being made, maybe. Or like do a food truck every now and then. I think that would be fun, although I feel like it would be so much work too. Okay. Get our garlic here minced up. Nice thing. You can also use garlic if you want, but I would just fresh garlic is a little bit nicer. You give my onions a nice little stir here. Break them up. And once they've got a nice kind of caramelization on them, a little bit more translucent, we'll throw in our garlic here. But want them to kind of cook up just a little bit. Get that garlic off my hands.
And what about a cookbook?
So that is one of my things that I'm in the works of for this next year. I hope to get, have time to sit down and do it. I already have several recipe cards posted for our members. So I think I'm probably up to almost 100 recipe cards or close to it. So, I'm like, it's already a really good starting ground to like incorporate into it. But it is a lot of work to like write down something when you're a cook like me, who is more about the feeling, like, yeah, this works or that works. And then I've been told that my guesstimations of my measurements might be a little off. They might be a little bit more than what I say, a tablespoon is. It might be a little bit more.
On the first page, we could just have an LC.
Yes. Figure out exactly what my true measurements are, because I kind of like, yeah, that looks like this and that looks like that. But it all comes down to taste on it. But I do hope to have that, especially because one of my favorite things to cook are soups. And I love to make all sorts of different types of soups. So I'm going to have a big section on soups, because those are I love a soup. I was always like, I'm a soup and salad girl. I love just lots of soups and lots of salads. I could eat those all the time. Okay, we've got our peppers out of here. I've got lots of little pepper specks on me, so let me grab this real quick. Onions smell nice. Okay. And then we're going to just dice these up. Actually, I'll probably get my garlic in here, give our onions about another minute. But I'm just going to do kind of small dicing on my peppers so that you don't have really big chunks. Ziti is kind of, it's a tubular shaped pasta. So any vegetable you cook is not going to really flow with it no matter what, because it's kind of got its distinct shape. But I'm going to do it smaller so that you get little bits throughout instead of bigger chunks. So I'm going to first kind of julienne them, and then I'll dice them up just so I have nice smaller pieces here. Now, when you're cutting peppers, I have found that if you cut them from the inside versus the outside where you have that smooth skin, you get a much better grip and a better cut on them. And, peppers, onions, tomatoes, those are my veggies when I know my knife needs sharpening, is when they keep snagging on them and I can't get a clean cut. That's when I know I need to sharpen my knife up. Oh, my peppers are already jumping in the pot there. And then I'll just go over a couple of times because, again, this isn't having to be a perfect, but just a good kind of between a small dice, a little bit bigger than a mince. We're going to throw our onions in here, or not our onions, our garlic in here in just a second. I'm going to turn my pan down now to a 4 now that my Dutch oven has completely heated up. You can see most of my onions are translucent. We've got a little bit of yellowish browning on them, which is perfect. We're going to drop this garlic in for just about a minute or so, and then we can follow up with our peppers. But that garlic does need to have a few minutes to toast up on that direct heat. And that already smells wonderful. Okay, I'm going to go over a few more times with my knife. And this way also I find when I chop my peppers up smaller, my kids don't notice them as much, and so they eat them willingly. And I think that's kind of like that first step in building good palates is just that constant exposure. Even though they might not eat it all or they pick around it, they're still exposed on a micro level to those flavors. Get this. Perfect. Throw our peppers in. Give this a good stir. I'm just going to take a peek back at my time on there. Good. A few more minutes before we need to take those meatballs out. Okay, I'm going to get my mushrooms sliced up and to add in here, and then we'll do our zucchini. I always do firmer fruits, or not fruits, firmer vegetables and like drier ones to softer and moisture ones. So, onions are always first no matter what. Then we did garlic as a seasoning, but then peppers, then mushrooms, then zucchini, because zucchini will let out a lot of liquid when you saute it. And you don't want, it's not good for sauteing if you let out too much moisture. Then you won't get that good, nice kind of saute mark on them. Now, this is about 8 ounces of mushrooms, baby bellas. I'm going to slice them thin. I like to get mine whole and then slice them myself because I can slice them even thinner than what you get, and they stay fresh longer.
Do you have a recipe for potato soup?
I do. I actually have several different recipes for potato soup, like a loaded baked potato soup, or you could do like a vichyssoise, which is a leeks and potato soup, which you can serve either hot or cold. And then I've got just a couple of different ones that are, like a cheesy one. I love good soups. I actually think you'll have to do some digging, but I have a couple videos on there of some different potato soups that I've done. I did a really good like kielbasa and potato soup the other day, and that was delicious.
And what are you making tonight?
So this is our baked ziti with our homemade meatballs that are baking up in the oven. And we're tossing in our mushrooms now. We're making the base for our sauce that we'll toss everything in. Let's get these mushrooms kind of coated up. I think I'm going to give a little bit more olive oil in here because the mushrooms are like sponges and they're going to soak everything up. And I do want a little bit more to get there. So just a splash more. There we go. I'm going to turn it up just to about a 6 now. We've got our base. And then I've got my zucchini. So we're going to cut the tops and bottoms off of these. And then I'm going to quarter each one because I don't want really thick chunks of, actually I'm going to do more than a quarter. I guess I'm going to 6 them, kind of cut them down. So I don't have super big chunks of zucchini in there, but more little tasty bits that will soak up the flavor of everything, but won't be like, a huge veggie in there. There we go. They're just nice little bits. And these, we'll throw them in. They will release a little bit more moisture out, which is why we're going to do them last. But once they're sauteed, we can kind of throw in our sauce. and then our first round of meatballs, but we can use that base to make the first part of our baked ziti to go into the oven. In there. So just a couple random chops over it. Okay. Let's go check on our meatballs, because remember we want to take them out just a few minutes before our, what's I going to say? Sourdough. So we've got 5 minutes kind of left on there. I'm going to give them a little tap, but remember our oven is nice and hot, but they are nice and firm. So our first ones are ready. I'll take these guys out. We've got about 5 more minutes on. But these are looking pretty fantastic. So this is our first round. We still have a whole nother batch of these meatballs to come. But I can work on what we're going to have for dinner before we kind of pop those in here. Just going to rest this right here, and I'm going to move my lid so we can just put them right there. But these are homemade. They're made with half Italian sausage and half ground beef. We made a panade using eggs, bread, and cream, and then seasoned them up with a garlic, salt, onion powder, Italian seasoning, oregano, and basil. Okay, we've got our mushrooms in here. We're going to add in our zucchini. In just a second. Just give this a nice little stir. And again, I'm not overloading with too much vegetables because, you know, you want to have just a little bit here and there in every bite. But it's also, since we're making it for a bunch of other people, you never know what veggies they're going to love or not. So when you have a little bit less, it's easier for them to kind of pick around. Slide this guy back over. And we'll kind of stir this up. Give it a good coating. And I'm going to sprinkle just a little bit of spices on them because I like my veggies to get just a little bit of flavor as well. We're going to use a little bit of Italian seasoning. And this will give a little extra pop to our sauce. About a teaspoon of Italian seasoning. And do a little bit of basil and a little bit of garlic salt. So half a teaspoon of basil.
Can you go over what's in the pot so far?
So in the pot, we've got onions, garlic, peppers, mushrooms, and zucchini. And then we added in some Italian seasoning, basil, and a little bit of garlic salt. We'll saute these veggies up. That way they have a good kind of, you know, cook on them before we submerge them with our sauce. And then we'll throw in our noodles, and we can kind of make the, you know, we'll put our ziti and meatballs down and get a nice layer of cheese over them and bake it up. And it doesn't need much baking because, again, everything is already hot and it will cook up well. Okay. Let's get, before we've got our things. So I'm going to use my favorite store-bought marinara sauce out there, which is just Rao's. It's really simple, not too fancy, not too jazzed up. But we're going to put a good amount in here for the base, and then I'll add some more in later. I will say, yes, you can spend the time to make your own. I've made my own sauce plenty of times. But I will tell you, if you want to make something quicker and faster but tastes good, just go and do some taste testing until you find the spaghetti sauce you love, because there are a bunch out there that I don't love. And then I've got this one as my favorite on there. But some are sweet, some have a lot of spices in them. But I think your tomato sauce is really personal, like what you like and love. So test a variety of them until you find the one you love. Okay, we'll get the second batch in here. And these are like the big old honkin' 40 ounces. We'll heat it up. And I'm gonna make some more meatballs, but I'm gonna put some of this in here now so I can scoop it out and get this baking for us for dinner, and then we'll go on to that second process on here. So for this base, we're gonna add in our meatballs and our pasta, but I'm not gonna add in all of them because again, we'll make it for our big batch here. But before we do that, because our oven is letting me know that we're ready for our sourdough. And then we can build our ziti, and then we can kind of do our next portion of it. Okay. Look at our beautiful traditional loaf. I'm going to bring this right over here. And then let me grab our next one. And this is our Parmesan and rosemary and garlic salt loaf. A little bit of black pepper. I hear ya. Okay. Now, when you do bake your sourdoughs, the one thing you want to do is you want to get them out of your Dutch ovens fairly quickly because these Dutch ovens stay really hot really fast and they will continue to cook the bottom of your sourdough. And so if you don't want your sourdough to become rock hard on the bottom, take them out. On here. But here is our traditional loaf. Gorgeous, beautiful. You can see our scoring, our expansion score, it really popped there. But look in the bottom, you've got this nice kind of golden brown crust, which is what you want. You don't want to cook it too dark. I cook mine to a nice blonde, golden blonde bake. You can always bake this another 10 minutes and get a darker crust, but that means the next day your crust will be really crunchy. This is, oh, here's my beautiful Christmas tree right there. See, look at that skill there with the trunk right there on there. But this is Parmesan and rosemary and a little bit of garlic salt. But it's just going to give you that just really wonderful, I mean, hearty flavor.
You ever have any leftover bread?
If we have leftover bread, I do sometimes give some to my parents, but I love to keep it to make grilled cheese sandwiches. Like today, we made some delicious grilled cheese sandwiches using some of our bougie cheeses that we got. It was so good. Okay, let's get some of these. Let's get this first batch of meatballs in here and then some noodles so we can scoop out and bake up our dinner. And then I can make the next batch of meatballs and finish up for that. So pop your meatballs into your sauce. That also keeps them nice and delicious. But if you wanted to freeze these down, just put them in a Ziploc baggie once they've cooled down, and then you can freeze them up and then just, kind of defrost them and reheat them as they go. They're so delicious. They're the most tender and flavorful meatballs out there. Not firm, not dry.
Mary sent you.
Well, thank you, Mary. We appreciate that. Now, the one thing with meatballs is I only cook these for 15 minutes. Don't overcook your meatballs. You don't need to cook them for very long. They're just small pieces of meat. Overcooking them will make them firm and dry out. So 15 minutes at 450, that was right underneath our Dutch oven, so probably a little less direct heat for the most perfect and delicious tender ending. So we're going to pour in some of our noodles now, and then we'll get this going to bake, and then I'll finish up with the rest of our dinner, or at least part of it, until we're ready to serve. Okay, let's see if I can get some of these noodles in here. I'm going to have to just scoop them up. It's too heavy. Okay, so we're going to toss them right in the sauce. This is why you want to cook them to right before al dente. A little bit of firmness because they're going to soak up that extra sauce and you don't want them to get soggy. So we're going to put enough in here for tonight's dinner, and then I'll add some more in later when we do our take and bake on our big pasta pan. But we should have enough in here for us for dinner right now. There we go. Coat this up with this sauce, and then we're going to spoon it out into our pan. You could always eat it like this, but what makes baked ziti so delicious is the cheese crust on top. So let me grab. This is a cast iron baked dish. I will say I love cast iron, guys. It's really great for keeping things nice and hot and warm. Let's scoop in our meatballs and our noodles here. Some of them we have on top. And we'll fill this dish out here. Get some more. And then we're going to coat it up with our sauce. Or not our sauce, with our cheese on top. We're going to do a mixture of mozzarella and Parmesan. Because those just give it. And so the nice thing is this is already hot. So once that cheese topping is melted, then your dinner is ready. Now, this is the point where if you want to do this and save this for later, you sprinkle that cheese on the top. You just cover it with foil, put it in your refrigerator, and whenever you're ready to do your bake, you just take it out and bake for about 20 to 30 minutes at 350, and you'll have a delicious dinner. Okay, I think we're good in here. Okay, let me get our cheese sprinkled over the top. We give it a good shake out. That should be good for us for dinner tonight. Now let me grab, we got mozzarella cheese. And we're going to sprinkle it over the top, kind of like you would, that cheese crust on a lasagna. There we go. And then we're going to do it with some Parmesan cheese as well. And that kind of gives you two flavors. Parmesan cheese crisps up a little nicer, so it'll give you a little bit of that crispier cheese crust on the top. And just nice. I like to use shaved Parmesan for this over a shredded because I feel like you get kind of those sheets of it melted and it just works out really nice. Okay, let's go put this guy in the oven to bake up. And then we can shape up some more meatballs and get the rest of this ready for our big dish that we won't be baking yet. But 450 you want for a cheese melt on this because everything is already hot. You want to do a higher temperature. But if you were going to do it from something right out of the fridge, like you made it in a hen, you want to do 350. And you might want to tent it with a little bit of aluminum foil first for the first 20 minutes, and then remove that, and then the last 10 minutes on top so you don't burn your cheese on top. Okay. Let's see if we can do record time rolling for these out. And then we got our big one to prep. I told you we got a lot of meatballs here. And I actually had more meat, and then I decided we don't need 10 pounds of meat for 20 people. I was thinking that's a lot of meat. Because when you're eating it, the meatballs are just kind of like a side versus a full-on protein. But when people you have a burger, it's like between a half pound, a quarter pound, patties. I was trying to think about that, and I have a problem of over making the amount of food that we need. I never ever undercut it. I always make more than enough. But it's one of those things where, at Thanksgiving, we used to do this thing where each family would take one night a week and cook the meals for everybody. I was the only person who made enough food for everyone. Everybody else, it was like, oh, here's your appetizer plate for dinner, because they're just not used to making for such big. And I have a lot of siblings and they have a lot of kids as well. So we're just really big families. So cooking for a lot of people is really easy for me. It was like when my husband and I were dating in college, and I would cook dinner for us because I was just so used to cooking for a big family growing up that I would make a meal and it would be I thought I was making it for 2 to 3 people, and it would be for 8 people. There was always so much leftovers. Okay. Get these. As I tell you, my meatballs get bigger and bigger because I want to do less and less rolling. But you can make them whatever size you want. You can make them smaller. Meatballs will shrink in a little bit because, of course, the liquid from the cream and just the fat and the meat will cook out as you bake them, so they'll kind of contract in. Not as bad as like hamburgers, like when you make a burger. I always make my joke that when I say I'm making smash burgers, they just turn out like regular burgers, because although I thought they were really thin, they always like contract in and are just like a perfect little regular burger. Okay. But again, for the seasonings on here, we use Italian seasoning, oregano, basil, onion powder, which gives a really great savory flavor to your meatball without really changing the texture like adding in diced up onions does. And then garlic salt. And then I use half ground beef, half Italian sausage. And you want to use mild Italian sausage, not spicy or sweet. There we go. We're almost down to the last little thing on here, so not too bad. I feel like this batch went faster than the first, but that also could just be me thinking it went faster. It's like you're on the final stretch here. Okay.
Who was your favorite chef growing up?
So, and I feel like this might be like a lot of people's or whatnot, but I kind of had two. I really loved Rachel Ray because I just, I liked her personality. She was really down to earth, and then I really like Gordon Ramsay, and I feel like that one's kind of like a cop-out one because he's so popular now. But I mean, I remember when he was new to the scene and I was a kid, and I remember watching like Hell's Kitchen and Kitchen Nightmares. And I just really liked him because I thought he was kind of funny. I would never want to cook for him because he was there. But it is funny, like, I feel like he would have been a successful person no matter what, because he was a soccer player who got injured. So, and so that was kind of interesting on that aspect. And we're a really big soccer player like family here. And slide these guys underneath there. Our cheese is almost ready. We want a little bit more bubbling there, so a few more minutes. And I love how he can be like such a jerk, but also a teddy bear. If you've ever seen him when he does like Master Chef Junior or whatever, the one where he does it with the little kids, and he's like the sweetest, nicest person. And I just think that's funny because he is not like that with adults. And it's just interesting. I remember when that came out, and I was like, how is he going to do this without scaring the children? But I like him, and because he also has like mastered so many cuisines. And it's not just in like one area, which is kind of like I like to dabble in a lot of different cuisines and try my hand at on there. But my big thing is comfort food, just making sure that whatever I make tastes good. Doesn't have to be super fancy, but is delicious. We're going to get the sauce base up here for the next batch of noodles. And when we get our meatballs, we'll toss them in here. Let's get these noodles in there, kind of soak them up.
And can you go over what's in the meatballs one more time?
Yes. So for our meatballs, okay, we're going to have to scoop these out. They're all sticking right now. Our meatballs are half Italian sausage, half ground beef. And I made a panade using egg, bread, and cream. And then we seasoned it with garlic salt, onion powder, Italian seasoning, basil, oregano, and that's it. And we're kind of coating them up. So you could always, my noodles are sticking here, but I do not like to coat them with butter or oil. And the reason why is when you coat them with butter and oil, then you create this smooth surface on your noodle, which prevents them from soaking up your sauce. And I want my noodles to soak up and get the flavor of our sauce, which is why we cook them at an al dente versus a like all the way down or a little bit before al dente, so that they have room to soften up and really bring in the flavor. Once they hit the sauce, they will break apart, so I don't ever worry about that. But that is my, like, everyone's like, oh, you could coat them. Don't do it, because it will just prevent them from soaking up the flavor.
Do you watch any of the cooking game shows, and would you ever do one?
You'd be surprised. I actually like watch like no TV, hardly any TV. It's actually kind of, there's just when you've got 5 kids and just I'm always doing something, moving around. I've got my parents live really nearby, and sometimes that's a blessing, and sometimes I'm like, oh, they're really close. But I don't really watch any TV. And it also makes me feel like I totally don't know what's going on sometimes. So no, I don't. Now I used to watch like Hell's Kitchen, MasterChef, Top Chef, or some of those things, but I haven't done it in a while because I'm just always out and about. I think it's kids sports. You're always gone. I'm always gone for like practices or games, and they keep us busy. And in general, like our kids, none of us really watch a lot of TV. So it's just kind of one of those things. But I always sometimes catch little clips on things and see like what people made or presented, like on, if I'm strolling through. And I always find that's fun. That's how I get my ideas of what I want to make for dinner. I'll look through and I'm like, oh, that looks good. Let me see if I can make that. Okay, we've got this batch. I've got a few more noodles. I just want to coat them up and get these guys in here. Now, for when you do like a baked spaghetti like this or a baked pasta, you need a hearty noodle, one that's not going to get soggy or mushy. Otherwise, I just threw that everywhere. That's me. This is why I couldn't be in a real kitchen, because they would throw me out because I'd be so messy. Here we go. Although my husband and I, we actually did this a couple of times because we watched it on back in the day when we had less kids and more time to ourselves. We watched a couple shows, but they had one where it was tasting and you had to taste different ingredients and name what they are. And we did that a couple of times. And I will say my palate was really, really good. My husband not so much. But I want to do that. Actually, I think I'm like, oh, we should recreate that, because I keep saying my 14-year-old son, he has a really good palate. And I think he would be really, really good at it. We had like some chocolate the other day, and he was able to guess all of the flavors in the chocolate, things that I couldn't even taste. He was like, oh, I taste orange in here. And I'm like, I couldn't get any hint of orange, but yet lo and behold, there was orange in it. So maybe I'll have to do a little games like that. Okay, let's go check our meatballs, or not our meatballs, but our dish to see if it's ready. We'll pour some more sauce over this, kind of get this ready for the next round. And we'll probably bid you adieu soon, because our looks like I'm going to rotate it. I want maybe 2 more minutes on it because I want it to have a good bubble. So almost done, guys. Let's get our last little bit of sauce in here, and then we can kind of pour it in our pan and we can get ready because we can tuck our meatballs in for that second round. But you need a lot of sauce when you do it. That's why you got to like your sauce. Okay. If we can get some of those veggies mixed up from down below. Here we go. I think we actually have a perfect amount in here. Put this up beautifully. And then we'll tuck our meatballs in, but we can actually start putting this into our really big, we've got my cheeses sitting in it. So I told you we're making this for a lot of people. I've got my heavy duty, extra large pasta pan here. And I would attempt to pick this up, but this is like probably 40 pounds. It is so heavy. So we're going to scoop it in here, and then knowing that I've got my whole second sheet of meatballs that we're going to tuck in here, so that when you eat this, you're getting meatballs in every single bite. No skimping on it, because that's the best part. And you want a little bit more. So like I have it extra saucy here, and that's because we're adding those meatballs in. But if you were going to not add them in, you want a little less sauce, because again, you don't want it drowning in sauce or it will get too soggy. Here. I'm seeing if my guesstimation of how many bags of pasta was going to fill this up was correct. And I thought 5 pounds of pasta minus probably a pound that we used in ours. This is one of those things where, like, when you're packing a car, when we go on our camping trip, and then, I'm like, oh, we can all get it in there. My husband's like, no way, it's not going to fit into the car. And he's probably like, no way that's going to fit in there. And I'm like, it's going to fit. It's going to fit. I think we're good here. Look at this. So much deliciousness. Perfect. And then our noodles, our rest of our dish should be ready. I'm going to see if it's a little bit less heavy now for me to be able to pour in here. Okay. Who knew being a chef would require so much arm strength?
You have a question? Do you do catering?
I do not do catering. I will make meals for my friends and family, because I like cooking for the people I know, and they'll be nice when they criticize. But no, I just do it for fun for my family. Like, most of the time I just, I cook big meals for my family because we're a large family. But I do have a couple friends that I will make, if they're throwing a party or something that I will do for them. Kind of like, just a friend helps a friend out type of thing. That's what I enjoy. Okay, let's go grab our dinner out of the oven. I'll slide this over here since we're done with this as well. And our meatball should be done in there, but we can get our dinner out and ready. Perfect. It was a perfect amount of extra time. Let me check my meatballs too, because they're actually looking almost ready there. So after we serve up, I will be ready to grab these out. But nice and delicious. Baked ziti with our homemade meatballs in there and our sauce. We're actually going to be serving it up with our rosemary bread. I made this loaf of bread to go with them for tomorrow. So let me get a plate and we're going to get ready to serve up this cheesy but delicious and great meal to have in your back pocket. Okay. So we'll slide this over here and we'll do a crumb reveal on our rosemary and the cheese in there, because I love to see the little cheese that we add in during the lamination process. So let me grab, I gotta get a bread knife for that because, here we go. And see if I have not used my shovel. It's my favorite. My husband thinks I'm silly, but you've never really truly lived until you have a shovel in your kitchen. Okay, let's serve up our dinner. So here is our cheesy baked ziti. Look at that delicious cheese pull on the top. We've got our homemade meatballs in here. I'm going to grab another little scoop. We added zucchini, mushrooms, and peppers and onions to our sauce. And then, of course, topped it with mozzarella and Parmesan cheese. We've got our homemade meatballs using Italian sausage and ground beef. And then we can cut into our beautiful Christmas loaf here. But let's see, I'm trying to decide how I want to cut. It's been a good minute, so it should have cooled down enough. But look at that beautiful crumb. You can see the rosemary and there's bits of Parmesan cheese throughout. Smells fantastic. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, kind of show you what we're making for our family, and I'll hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page, so if you ever want to recreate any of these recipes at home, you can just go to our page, search for what we made. So we've got our baked ziti and sourdough, and you can watch and cook along with me again. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront that has all of our different cooking gear and gadgets in it. I've got my Dutch ovens, my pans, I've got my awesome stock pot there in there as well. All the different gadgets that I use in the kitchen I have in there for you guys to check out. But again, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget